Welcome to Fantasy Focus. Today's show is presented by Hotwire on the live stream. You can watch us every day on the ESPN Twitter feed, on the ESPN Facebook page, and the ESPN YouTube feed, as well as the ESPN app. And if you're listening to the audio feed, today's podcast is presented by Geico. You can download Fantasy Focus wherever you get your podcasts. And with that, we say hello. Friday, August 6th, Field and Matthew hanging out with you to close out the first week of the podcast. Matthew, not a bad week if you ask me.
No, happy Ocho Day. Happy. It's the Ocho Day. It is ESPN the Ocho.
Correct. On ESPN 2.
Is on ESPN 2 once again. They're taking it over. They do it every August.
I believe it's on this day because we have the actual Ocho, August the 8th, is on a Sunday, so maybe just a better programming option on Friday.
Right, but I noticed on your Twitter feed, at Field Yates, clever name, by the way. I don't know how you came up with that handle, but very well done. At Field Yates.
Yeah, follow
him. Absolutely. I noticed that you tweeted that, yes, today is Ocho Day. Today we turn ESPN2 into the Ocho, and coming up at 5:30 p.m. Eastern is the annual Mullet Championship.
Yeah, huge. There's been a lot of momentum surrounding this event. They had to delay it a year because of COVID. So actually, tonight is the 2020 Mullet Championship. And in speaking to sources close to the event, the 2021 competition is actually underway as well already. So you might get two for the price of one.
Double the mullet.
Right. And if you think about some of the best players in the NFL, I mean, just objectively speaking, I would think Cole Holcomb, linebacker for the Washington football team.
Yeah, obviously.
And David Andrews, center for the New England Patriots, plus Quentin Ewers, from he's a high school, well, he would have been a high school senior. He was like, you know what? Quinn Ewers is like, I'm out. I butchered that name the first time. Quinn Ewers. He's only the number one player in the country. He's bypassing his senior year of high school to enroll early into Ohio State, considered by some to be a future NFL star. And what do those three have in common?
I bet you they all have mullets.
They all have mullets. And I think, I don't know if Madden ratings factor in mullets or not, but if any of those aren't 90 plus, I have an issue.
Well, listen, I'll be honest with you. I don't follow the Mullet Championship the way you do.
Right. Is that out of...
Well, it's honestly, it's out of jealousy. Like, I'm follically challenged.
Didn't want to say it.
You know what I mean? I'm follically challenged, obviously. Yeah. And I'm sitting there. Who wants to watch TV and watch these, watch these men with this long, glowing, beautiful hair that they can do anything with? Who wants, who needs to torture themselves like that? I don't need that. I don't watch bodybuilding either. I don't like to watch people that do things better than me. Like, I don't watch other people get right. Football I watch, right, of course, but I don't like watching people give analysis. Because that's also something I don't do particularly well. Look, explain to me how the Mullet Championship, like what happens on the Mullet Championship. Look at Secret Squirrel, if you're watching the video feed, just torturing me with his long, luxurious, glorious hair. He's got more hair than he could cut a bunch of hair and that would be more than I have.
My goal for the fantasy show this year is to grow my hair out long enough so that I could stand behind Matthew and drape it over him and it looks like his hair.
Doesn't it?
That's what it is.
Yes,
that is my goal this season.
Wow, I think a mullet would support Daniel really well. But all I know about the Mullet Championship is that $2,500 are up for grabs. And I don't recall the specific documentary, but I'm pretty sure. I have to go check this. It was one of those things that me and my high school friends used to laugh about all the time. Might have been college friends, where it was like this short documentary about the history of mullets. For those unfamiliar, it's a bi-level haircut, right? Business up top, party in the back. Yeah. And there was this line, and I don't know if this was fact or fiction. It was a documentary, and you never know what to believe or not in some of those. It was on the internet, so the internet, as you know, can be sometimes reliable, sometimes not.
Yes. I watched a really cool documentary called Spinal Tap, and it was about a real English band. It was really good.
Yeah, but this it was description. It was like, a mullet, often referred to as a bi-level haircut, known most specifically for parts in New Jersey. I was like, what? Does New Jersey have a disproportionate amount of mullets?
No, I would have picked somewhere down south. I would have had you asked me what's the mullet capital of the world, and I don't know, but I would have said
wherever Joe Dierte is from.
Yeah, exactly.
Joe Dirt.
Right. I mean, like,
although he was kind of a vagabond.
Kentucky, Louisiana, Alabama, Texas, or one of the Louisiana, somewhere in that area.
Yeah, I don't know.
My second oldest son is going into his senior year at Tulane. He has a mullet. And,
what?
Yeah.
How have you waited this long to tell us this information?
Oh yeah, it's not like a hardcore mullet, but like it's mullet. It's mullet-esque.
Wow, you must be so proud.
A lot of his buddies at Tulane have mullets.
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty popular. They're popular in the lacrosse world, as we know. They're popular right now in the NFL, and they're popular on the Fantasy Focus Football Podcast. It's probably about time we turn from mullets to football, so we're going to talk about a little bit of news. And when I say news, really a recap of the Hall of Fame game. And listen, people, I'm excited. We were excited to watch football last night. I don't care if you weren't excited about it. I was. And last night we had a game between the Steelers and the Cowboys. 16-3 was the final. The Steelers win. Matthew, I'm not going to glean too much from this game fantasy-wise, but if there was anything at all that stuck out to you, what might it have been?
Najee Harris going to touch the ball a lot.
Yeah, seriously, right?
Like, Najee Harris was getting carries in the second quarter. It's the first preseason game. And Chase Claypool left the game in the first quarter. He got the wind knocked out of him, basically. Mike Tomlin said after the game he's fine.
Yep.
But like on a long play, but it's just one of those. It was one of those moments like, oh right, we're playing tackle football. We're playing for real here. Things can happen. Bad things can happen. And so the fact that Najee Harris was getting carries in the second quarter, I tweeted something about this. Like, what are we doing, people? But I think, look, he was used early and often in this game. I think basically through like midway through the second quarter.
Yeah.
Like, Najee Harris is going to touch the ball a lot. It may not be the most efficient running back in the NFL, but I thought he looked the part.
Yeah.
And by the way, I also again, it's the first preseason game, but the offensive line didn't look as much of a disaster as I think some people think the Steelers' offensive line is going to look like.
Isn't it kind of weird how we buried the lead? There was one touchdown scored last night. One.
Single touchdown.
One touchdown scored last night from 4 yards out from none other than the Ballage Barrage. Kalen Ballage plunged in from 4 yards, looking electric on that run right there.
I can't believe you didn't start with that.
Competition? I mean, have we considered the idea that the Steelers may have blown their first-round pick?
Yeah.
Given the fact that they have Kalen Ballage on the roster.
It's fair. It's fair. And, listen, is Najee Harris, Jaylen Samuels, and Kalen Ballage, like, are they in a Ballage à trois?
Wow, he just did that, didn't he?
I'm asking. Like, obviously, listen, you know me, I want to move into the Ballage Mahal. Like, I'm ready for a Ballage Barrage.
Yeah.
You know me. I have an unhealthy obsession with Kalen Ballage.
Yeah, he did.
It was nice to see. Look, Kalen Ballage was actually useful last year in fantasy for the Chargers.
Yeah.
Again, not the most efficient guy, but got work. This is Najee Harris's job. I know you're joking, having fun here. Najee Harris is going to touch the ball early and often, and I think he will. I think he will challenge for the league lead in total, assuming health. I think he will challenge for the NFL lead in overall touches among running backs. I don't think that he'll get there, but he'll be top 5.
Yeah, I agree. I really do agree. I think, and I said this when we talked about him a few days ago, and I understand that calling anything safe in fantasy is a little bit risky, but he feels like one of the safer picks right now based off of current ADP, which I think is like RB12 or 13.
Yeah, much prefer. I have him ranked ahead of Jonathan Taylor, which I might look really stupid at the end of the year, but right now I'm one spot ahead of Jonathan Taylor.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think it's that crazy. Although I do have some expanded thoughts on Jonathan Taylor when we revisit that story at some point over the next few days. All right, enough of the Hall of Fame game. Good to have.
I have one other comment from the Hall of Fame game.
The Cowboys need a different kicker.
The kicking was suspect throughout that game on both sides. On both sides of the ball here, but and this is not for anything. But did you catch Peyton Manning's interview in the booth with Troy Aikman and Joe Buck? Oh, yeah, you tweeted about it. So listen, I get accused of being a company man, and I am. But I will tell you, I don't know that I am more excited for something this company has done than signing Peyton and Eli to do Monday Night Football and the alternate broadcast for the next 3 years. They're doing like 10 games over the next 10 games each of the next 3 years on E2, and some of them will be on ESPN Plus as well. And that's no disrespect to our great Monday Night Football team led by Steve Levy, but it was just Peyton is somebody he's so charismatic, he's funny, and also obviously a guy that knows football, backwards, forwards, has forgotten more than, anyone else is going to ever know. And it was just a glimpse into what you can expect. And I think I'm really excited about that. No one's asked me to say that. I mean, like, I don't agree with everything this company does, but I thought that's one of the best moves of the offseason that we've made.
Yeah, it was certainly fun to see Peyton in the booth. He looks very natural in there, even if he tucks his sunglasses into his pants pocket. Who does that?
I know.
No one does that other than Peyton. But you can't.
He's 18. It doesn't matter.
That's a good point. It does not matter.
He's above the law. There's nothing. He can do whatever he wants.
Sheriff. He's the sheriff.
He is the sheriff. He is the law. He's above the law. There's a first season of Peyton's Places. There's an episode that I'm in, where we went and visited the birthplace of fantasy football. Right? I was there. Peyton and I interviewed each other, and but that was like one of the best hour and a halves of my life. Like, just he's like everything you want him to be, right? Yeah. He's charming and engaged, and bright and funny and self-deprecating, and anyway, just a huge fan.
All right, from Peyton Manning, we move forward to Double Trouble.
Double Trouble. Double Trouble. Double Trouble. Double Trouble.
As of this moment, they're on double secret probation.
That was awesome. All right, great job right there. And time for Double Trouble involving the Bills and the Miami Dolphins. So we'll move to the AFC East today, which means we're on to our 5th and 6th teams of the NFL this preseason. We start in Buffalo with Josh Allen, who I was trying to think about. I was thinking about this morning, Matthew. Like, what's the analysis on Josh Allen? He's quarterback 2 in everybody's rankings behind Patrick Mahomes. Last year, he had close to 40 passing touchdowns, 8 rushing touchdowns. It seems reasonable that, I don't know, for the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years, Josh Allen could challenge for 40 passing touchdowns, 10 rushing touchdowns, 4,500 passing yards, and 500 rushing yards every season.
Every season.
There's, like, not much more to say than this, other than, like, he's a really, like, I guess the only thing I was thinking about is that given that we all have him number 2, is there any, maybe this, here, I think there were 2 thoughts that I had. One would be, is it a 2-quarterback tier at the top with Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen?
See, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think it's Patrick Mahomes.
Okay.
Yes.
One-man tier.
And then I think it's a one-man tier, but it's not that far a drop.
Gotcha.
Right? You know what I mean? Like, and I think, listen, if I leave a draft and I have Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Kyler Murray or Dak Prescott or Russell Wilson, we did a mock yesterday, a 12-team mock. I got Russell Wilson as like QB7. I was thrilled with it. I think Seattle, I actually think Seattle's offense is going to explode a little bit this year. I think people are sleeping on Seattle a little bit, but that's a discussion for another Double Trouble. But any of those guys that are right there sort of in that mix, Lamar Jackson as well. So I was going through the note last night, and when I go through it, and I'm just like sort of think about like what I want to say about each player, and I had the sort of same reaction, like, what am I going to tell you about Josh Allen you don't know? Guy's a stud, right?
Yeah, he's awesome.
He's a fantasy rock star. The only thing I could say is like, there were concerns about the accuracy. Adding Stefon Diggs actually obviously helped that tremendously last year. Now a second year in the system, even more of a connection between the two of them. We expect great things from both players this year. I thought adding Emmanuel Sanders in the offseason, and we'll get to him as an individual player, but just a veteran player like Emmanuel Sanders can only help Josh Allen. Having another reliable target. I like Gabriel Davis. They lost John Brown, but they add Sanders. We'll talk about Beasley in a second, but he's got nice pass-catching weapons as well. Here's the only question I ask, and I ask this question of you. So Josh Allen saw 30% of the Bills' red zone carries and 36% of their goal-to-go carries last season. Given that he is the franchise, and that we have seen this before with running quarterbacks, where they have a lot of fantasy success early, and then they get hit so much, and then sometimes, not always, but sometimes coaches are like, all right, we need to dial back the running a little bit because you are the franchise. And so my question is there any chance that we see less designed runs for Josh Allen? The rushing's always going to be there. The scramble is always going to be part of his game.
Right.
But 36% of a team's goal-to-go carries is a lot for a quarterback.
It's a totally fair question. So
especially a quarterback that isn't built like Cam Newton.
Right. But he has at least 8 rushing touchdowns in each of his 3 seasons.
Yep.
So that's good. Same offensive coordinator, Brian Daboll, so systematically should be the same, who also good. They did not make a major running back investment this offseason.
Correct.
Also good. Last thing I'll say that I think is worthwhile is that, like, the Bills are so close this year, right? They made it to the AFC Championship game last year. that like they're on the precipice, they're on the doorstep, that like by any means necessary might be their MO this year, next year, and the next year. If you're a team that's like a little bit further behind in your sort of franchise arc than where the Bills are, you might be thinking about, hey, let's not do anything crazy here.
Right.
We have if you're the Chargers as an example, and Josh Allen was the quarterback there, you might be like, I'm not so sure we want to be, we'll have time. We have maybe 15 years ahead, and we want to get to the top or close to it before we empty out all of the sort of tools we have available to us.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm just like, again, we're nitpicking here, right? So my thought is that probably not, even though it's a really fair point.
Yeah, and by the way, I agree with you. I agree with everything you just said. I have him at number 2. I think he's entirely safe. And just to add to all the things that you said about the sort of the Bills and sort of their organization, where they are as a team and everything like that, understand that Sean McDermott, their head coach, obviously came from Carolina during the prime Cam Newton years, where, say, like, again, Josh Allen isn't Cam Newton, but
It's pretty darn close.
But they weren't scared to use Cam Newton at the goal line for many, many years, all while Sean was there. And obviously, Cam had tremendous success in Carolina.
And it was the line from Cam was either like, you can't change a tiger's stripes, or like you can't.
Got to let the lion roar, I think.
The lion roar, that's what it was. Yeah, one of those large cats that he was discussing way back in the day. All right, let's go to Stefon Diggs. And again, the same deal was that. Like,
by the way, one last thing about Josh Allen, this is just a fun fact.
Okay.
I got to interview him at the NFLPA rookie premiere. I get to go that every year. Obviously, didn't go the last 2 years because of COVID, but I got to interview him at the NFLPA rookie premiere. And often when I go up to the rookies, like, here's who I am. Nice to meet you. My name is Matthew Berry. I do fantasy football. So these questions are going to be, before the interview. Like, and I walk up to him and he's just like, hey, Matthew. Like, knew who I was. And I was like, oh my God, you know who I am? He's like, dude, you're looking at a 3-time fantasy champ.
Let's go.
And I was just like, really? He goes,
Maybe
I won last
one.
year. And I said, really? I said, who was on your team? So we go through his team, and he tells me, and he's going through his team. He goes, oh, my tight end was Charles Clay. And that he was going into I was like, so you've now been at rookie camp. I said, do you think you'll tell Charles that he was on your team? He's just like, no, probably not. I was just like, just so you know, just as somebody who's told NFL players they were on his fantasy team, that's a good move. That's a good move.
Charles,
but I said, you might be the first NFL player in history to have had a player on his fantasy team and then thrown an actual NFL pass to that player.
That is pretty funny.
So anyway,
Good job.
Josh is one of us. Just if there's not another reason to love Josh Allen from fantasy football, he's one of us.
All right, let's get to Stefon Diggs, and we can make this, again, fairly abbreviated because there's not a whole lot to say about Stefon Diggs other than one thought I had. Stefon Diggs last year led the NFL in targets, receptions, and receiving yards. So the only major receiving category he didn't lead the NFL in is touchdowns. We've been told countless times over from our friend Mike Clay, and through a lot of people, that touchdowns are the most difficult thing to predict or repeat year over year. I don't think the Bills' philosophy will change this year with Stefon Diggs. Stefon Diggs is, if anything, getting better and better each year. Is there a case for him as wide receiver 1 this year?
There is a case for him, but it's not one that I buy.
Okay.
Because Aaron Rodgers is playing there, and you've got Devontae Adams. And for me, like, Devontae Adams is everything that Stefon Diggs is, with just a much longer track record.
Okay.
Right? Stefon Diggs played all 16 games last year for the first time in his career. Hamstring issues are one of those things that always seems to nag him. Like, I felt like for a lot of times in Minnesota, it was just like, and there were always a lot of those weeks where he ended up playing, but it was just like he wasn't as good. I remember, not last year, but I remember in previous years, we've done a study and we looked at it, and weeks in which Stefon Diggs was on the injury report, whether or not he played, like, his production was significantly lower than weeks when he was fully healthy.
Right.
To me, we talked about this when we did the mock draft. Travis Kelce is as close thing there is to Money in the Bank from a non-quarterback position in fantasy, right? And probably just even including quarterbacks. I would argue Devontae Adams is number 2 in that category in terms of Money in the Bank. But if you're asking me, is there a scenario where Stefon Diggs finishes this year as the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy? Absolutely.
And we say that fairly frequently amongst wide receivers. Like, A.J. Brown, and obviously guys at the top near like
Calvin
Stefon
Ridley.
Diggs and Tyreek Hill, but like, yeah, exactly. Calvin Ridley and Keenan Allen and A.J. Brown and Adam Thielen, who himself has been wide receiver 1 this season. So Justin Jefferson is teammate.
They all have a chance to finish as number 1, but
my point is that
Yeah.
like because like I think there's maybe a 20% chance that Stefon Diggs could finish that high. Let's say it's 30 to 35 for Devon. Maybe I'm aggressive here, but the point is that if he's the third most likely wide receiver to finish as wide receiver 1, he might wind up being a value if he goes 6, 7, 8, 9 spots later than Devontae Adams in your draft. What do you got, Daniel?
Just speaking of value, I just want to remind everybody that last year he was our 06010 Best Value Award. His ADP was 63rd overall.
Yeah, he talked about that like when he was going through his career highlights, you know, like leading the NFL in receiving yards, being named All-Pro, earning a $70 million extension, being named Best Value on the
06010 Best Value.
Like, I mean, it's really a crowning achievement for a guy that's accomplished a lot already.
that was last year. Well, I was about to say that was the best offseason move of any team in the NFL last year, adding Stefon Diggs to that offense. I was going to say that, and then I realized
Like,
Tom Brady. You're
Yeah.
right. Oh, yeah, the Buccaneers added Tom Brady and won a Super Bowl and got Bruce Arians a Super Bowl. Sorry, second best non-Tom Brady division.
No, I mean, that's truly, though, like
Seriously.
one of the greatest, I think, though, separate and apart from that, most win-win trade I can ever think of for
both.
in the NFL.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
It was ridiculous, and that's why. By the way, I always, for the people that say like that knock like that are anti Lamar Jackson, that are anti Jaylen Hurts because they talk about the accuracy, and I was just like, look at Josh Allen. Josh Allen was an inaccurate quarterback, a scrambling inaccurate quarterback, and then they added Stefon Diggs, and then you know what? All of a sudden, like, no, is he Drew Brees? No, is he not? He's not Drew Brees, but he suddenly looks a lot better in terms of his accuracy and his production as a quarterback once you give him a superstar wide receiver. So and whatever. Lamar Jackson is already a superstar, right? Former MVP. But you understand my point.
Yep. Those Bills were easy to discuss. We're going to have the slightly more complicated conversations in just a minute. But first, do you own or rent your home? Yep. Sure you do. And I bet it can be hard work. But you know what's easy? Bundling policies with Geico. Geico makes it easy to bundle your homeowners or renters insurance along with your auto policy. It's a good thing, too, because you already have so much to do around your home. Go to geico.com, get a quote, and see how much you could save. It's Geico easy. Visit geico.com today. That's geico.com.
Hey, Matthew, want to get in shape but having trouble staying motivated?
Why him?
Well, why don't you...
And no, I clearly don't want to get in shape, because if I did, I'd have done something about it. In
know
the
what you
first
would have
50
done?
years of my life.
You would have made 5-hour energy shots part of your lifestyle and gotten that energy boost that you needed in order to get fit like Field. We all know sometimes you just don't want to go to the gym. We've all been there, right?
What do you mean sometimes?
Well, most of the time. But that's why you take a 5-hour energy shot to give you the feeling and alertness that you need so you can get to the gym. With zero sugar and convenient portable sizes, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5-Hour Energy website has a ton of flavors, too. They've got watermelon, tropical burst, they've got cherry, they've got peach, they've got mango. There are flavors there for everyone. You can try them all. And on the site, as a part of trying them all, you can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack. You choose the flavors, and it's delivered right to your door. All right, so get this. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5, hourenergy.com, and get some 5-Hour Energy product today, you can use the promo code FFF to receive 10% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. This code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today /FFF.
By the way, just speaking of no, I was saying speaking of the gym. Just Daniel, remember this, and Field will too. But we did I think the first or second season of the fantasy show. We wanted to do a sketch that involved the gym. Me and Daniel at the gym, along with Statapillar, and we went to the gym. And we have a gym here on the ESPN campus. And I tried to get in, and so we have IDs. We have these, IDs that everyone has, all the employees, and it wouldn't open for me. And I didn't understand. I'm like, have I been fired? Like, what's going on? What's wrong with my ID? And it turns out that in order to get inside the gym, you have to go to the office and fill out a waiver. Sign a waiver, and then your ID gets scanned in so that it allows you to get into the gym. And just like I'd been working at the company for a decade and had no idea about this. Just like really,
I'd never made it over.
I'd never made it even into the gym to like get a drink of water.
Oh, the best part. Hold on. The best part is you literally walk past the gym in order to get to your office in Building 0.
In Matthew's defense, his office is like 14 feet from
Literally
the gym.
right next to it.
He never went over there just to like get a cup of coffee from the coffee machine that's inside the gym.
Right.
I love it.
There's even showers there. You could have showered back in the day there.
Yeah. That's so good.
I had one more mullet comment. I forgot about Dan Feeney from the Jets. He's got an electric mullet who was showing that off.
I was trying to think when you were talking
about
it. I was trying to think of what the most famous mullet in sports is. I have a nominee.
Oh, I don't think it's a question. Go ahead, yours first.
Randy Johnson.
That's a good. That's a good
Randy
answer.
Johnson,
I think
famous
there's a
pitcher,
clear cut.
obviously, for the Mariners and
I was
many
gonna
other
say Barry
teams,
Melrose.
Diamondbacks.
Barry Melrose is up there. I think Yarmir
Barry
Yager
Melrose is
back
up
in the
there.
day. Yarmir Yager and DeMario Lemieux back when they were
that's
just
fair.
dominating for the Penguins in the early 90s. Yager's was
I would argue.
So
I would
good.
still argue for. Barry Melrose is a great call just because he's a legend and he's been on our airways for 25 years or whatever it is. But I would just argue Randy Johnson because of baseball, like with the hat. It's so
was nice.
prominent.
Yeah.
And he was such a dominant pitcher for so many years.
Do we still have the poll available? I feel like we can
think
up
we
our
do.
we can
I'll pull
level
it
up
up.
with the
Kyle,
poll
let's do
this year.
that.
Thirsty Kyle or Yaxon. I think we should do a poll. I actually don't want to do a poll. I don't want to do because I don't want to limit it to answers. I just want to do like who has the most iconic mullet in sports history, and just leave the reply button open, and we'll see how that turns out.
I like it.
Fair enough.
By
I
Monday.
like it.
Got it.
All right, let's get back to the Bills. And I talked about how there's not much to say with the quarterback and the wide receiver, but there's a lot to say about the running backs, Matthew, as Devin Singletary and Zach Moss will probably form something of a committee this year. So I'm going to start with Zach Moss, but the conversation is kind of concurrently about both of them. I have Devin Singletary ranked one spot ahead of Zach Moss, 39 versus 40. I'm the only person who actually has Devin Singletary ahead of Zach Moss. Is there a strong case for either of these backs, or are these guys that are simply nothing more going into the season for you than bench stashes?
I think there's some. I have them reversed. So I have Zach Moss.
Is there a reason why you have them ranked you do?
Yes.
The way you do? What's
There
your
is.
reason?
Twofold. Number one is, so this is year 3 of Devin Singletary, year 2 of Zach Moss. I sort of feel like at this point, Devin Singletary is what it is. Okay. Like, if one of these guys breaks out this year, I think there's a better chance it's Zach Moss than it is Devin Singletary. I also think there's more scoring equity and upside in Zach Moss than there is in Devin Singletary. Goal to go. I mean, listen, this is a guy who got 13 or more touches in 3 of the final 4 games. He led the team in both red zone and goal to go carries. I mean, Josh Allen obviously is always a threat at the goal line, but Zach Moss did actually lead the team in both. He's also, so I'm at 33. His ADP is 36. He's going in the 13th, 14th round. And while we both said that we think Josh Allen's goal line work continues, there's a chance it doesn't. And I feel like if it doesn't, it's going to go to Zach Moss. We think this is going to be one of the best offenses in the NFL. We think they're going to be in scoring position often.
Yeah.
And so Zach Moss, who came into last year, again, shortened preseason, no actual preseason games. He was a rookie, but this is somebody that excelled in college in terms of between the tackle and in short yardage situations. Maybe second year, as we talk about, rookies always make that biggest leap. Players always make that biggest leap from year 1 to year 2. I think there's a chance Zach Moss has a breakout this year. I don't think it's a significant one, obviously, because I have him at running back 33. But that is slightly higher than his ADP of running back 36. And I will say, I am at 33, and I have Devin Singletary at 47. So I have a pretty wide split between where I'm taking the Bills running backs, because I don't think there's any upside to Devin Singletary. This is what we talked about yesterday with the Never James White. I think Devin Singletary is a fine football player, but I think there's no upside to him barring an injury to Zach Moss. Yeah. I do think there's a chance, maybe it's 20%, maybe it's 40%, but I think there's a chance somewhere in there that Zach Moss becomes the number 1 running back on the Bills and gets 8 to 10 touchdowns this year.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And it actually it has made me reconsider some things. The reason why I hedged towards Singletary is, at least last year in terms of usage, was a far busier pass catcher. Had 38 receptions last year, just 14, I believe, for Zach Moss. So it seemed like there was more passing game involvement. I'm not sure that either player has a dramatic tip of the scales in his favor right now. And it may be that another one of these guys proves fantasy worthwhile.
Yeah.
Either way, right? So, but I may have to reconsider based off some of the points you just made right there. Let's get
Congratulations,
to the
man.
Yeah.
Very way to go.
Can I just take the rest of the show
That's
off?
a win. No, you cannot. No. Sorry.
Go to the gym.
Stop. You can go to the gym or you can do the rest of the show. You decide.
I'll do the rest of the show.
Okay.
I mean, I'd have to find my way to the gym. I'd have to ask
I know, you
directions,
gotta
which
get
is
to the-
awkward. Like,
Yeah.
I'm disoriented from where I am now in this studio. Like, it'd be so awkward. And I don't think I ever did sign the waiver. So
I don't
like, somebody
think
had
you
to
did.
swipe me in to do the bit, to do the sketch. Literally, somebody had to swipe me in.
that
So I
is
still
so
don't think my ID
amazing.
works.
I think that's accurate.
at the gym. All right.
All right, let's talk about the wide receivers who aren't named Stefon Diggs. So Cole Beasley last year was wide receiver 31 on a points per game basis, 13.8 points per game. Emmanuel Sanders, playing for the Saints, was wide receiver 41 at 11.8 points per game. And then Gabe Davis, who figures into this mix as well, was wide receiver 67 last year, just under 9 points per game, Matthew. So do we think this offense is good enough to sustain 3 fantasy-relevant wide receivers, or do you think the limit is 2?
I think it is good enough to sustain 3 fantasy wide receivers in various games, but throughout the season, I think it's only 2.
Okay, and so is there a second? And clearly,
And I'm going to say Emmanuel Sanders.
interesting.
And I'll say it for 2 reasons.
Okay.
Number one is just in terms of, I like Emmanuel Sanders. I think he's underrated. He's drawing rave reviews from camp.
Yep.
And I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole, but I think there's a chance Cole Beasley doesn't play this year
Because of the vaccine stuff?
because of the vaccine stuff. Like, I mean, I don't
gonna
want to make this a
play, yeah.
political thing, and I don't want, and it's weird that vaccine talk is political and all because it shouldn't be, but because it's all based in science. But my point is that the NFL, and correct me if I step out of bounds here, because you understand this stuff better than I, but from what I understand, the NFL has basically said, like, if you're not vaccinated, you're not playing this year. Do I have that correct?
No. If you're not vaccinated, it's just that you have a much more, to be honest with you, with some of the things that are happening recently, even vaccinated players have a much more limited lifestyle. But if you're not vaccinated, the protocols are much, much steeper for you to face every single day. You're getting tested daily, which adds potentially hours onto your day every day.
Right.
You have much less ability to be around other people, especially in large groups. Teams that play in cold weather climates, outdoors, are going to have to do meetings potentially outdoors in December and January. Imagine being, I don't know, wherever, somewhere that's really, really cold. So yeah, you're playing this year. It's
Okay.
just, and because I would listen, I don't know what the exact number is, but I think it's somewhere around 10% of the league has not received 1 vaccination shot, and I think that number could stay around 10%.
Right. And Beasley's been very public about where he stands on this particular issue, and
Yep.
so I don't know. It's not this is not a political take on a fantasy situation. I'm merely saying, I want to be very clear about that. I just think there is risk with Cole Beasley this year that where there wasn't previously. I like Emmanuel Sanders a little bit better.
Okay, I like Cole Beasley better than Emmanuel Sanders this year, only because the target volume was absurd last year.
It was
just over 100.
He had a great year last year.
101 targets last year for Cole Beasley. He's just like a good player. Like, I don't think age is a factor for him, despite the fact that I believe he's almost 30, if not over 30 now. Like, I'm not concerned about regression. The concern with Cole Beasley is really simple, is that there's not a lot of touchdown equity for him, but the volume might be good enough to offset any other upside that Emmanuel Sanders may have. Sometimes.
Isn't there a chance, though, that Emmanuel Sanders takes some of that volume away? Because the Cole Beasley argument is volume.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's not touchdown equity. It's volume, right? Yeah. And that they didn't have a consistent second pass catcher outside of Stefon Diggs, other than Beasley, who emerged over the second half of last year, and he had a great season. There's no question.
Yeah.
But having Sanders there and Gabriel Davis another year, and that maybe Beasley doesn't get the kind of volume he did last year.
Interesting. Yeah, so John Brown last year in 9 games had over 50 targets, so almost 6 targets per game. So I'm almost wondering if that goes to Emmanuel Sanders.
Right.
Gabe Davis is still not a bit player, but he is, if you look at his season last year, I think it was 9 games with 2 or fewer catches. So he had 35 catches in total, but he was not a consistent part of the offense. And don't laugh, Jay Kumaro is generating some buzz in the Bills training camp this year. You want to do a board bet just for fun? You want to just get
Sure.
weird? John, a Cole Beasley versus Emmanuel Sanders board bet. That's
100%.
a nice, safe,
Yeah.
we're not getting too contentious.
I say Emmanuel Sanders has a better fantasy season this year than Cole Beasley.
And I say that Cole Beasley has a better fantasy season this year than Emmanuel Sanders.
Put it on the board.
Put it on the board.
Well done, Daniel. That was
Hey,
good.
Quick question. Does he need to be does Cole Beasley need to be a Bill in order to have a better fantasy season? If he gets released and then picked up by another team, is this board bet still good, or is he?
I think we're a long ways away from either of the scenarios that
we've talked about. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we don't get in a weird spot with that. So that's cool.
I think we're a long ways away, but
here's the thing about that, and the last point of that, because I don't want to get down that rabbit hole, but I'm just saying, like, it's whether it's a 1% chance or a higher than that, like there's a non-zero chance that this is an issue that continues, right? That somehow affects his playing status in one way or the other, right?
He has stated that he's going to not say anything further on it, so we shall see. I just don't know. I don't know enough.
He released a rap song on it too, though. He said, "I'm not going to say anything more," and then he released a rap song on it.
That was good, good way to generate some buzz, though, right?
Smart guy. And
marketing,
by the way, apparently, I am not a rap aficionado. Big
really?
shock.
Wow.
I like some rap. I like some old school rap, but I'm not as.
When are we gonna get some Barry bars?
I was gonna say, is he like Beethoven considered rapper, like old school, like back when Beethoven was rapping
like,
in high school
whatever,
days.
like whatever, Eminem, Jay-Z, like old school, like whatever, right? Yeah. But anyway, so that's the stuff I like. But Cole Beasley, apparently, his last album, I found this out when I heard about the new song that he just did.
Did well.
Apparently his last album did very well, actually.
Okay. How about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
props to Cole Beasley, the rapper.
Kyle notes, by the way, that he's taking Gabe Davis as the door C in that board bet. So he's a big fan.
He loves Gabe Davis this year.
I like Gabe Davis.
Beasley's being drafted, wide receiver 48. Sanders is not being drafted. One thing I will say about Gabe Davis, tell me if you think this is crazy. We did a 12-team mock draft yesterday. It'll be up on ESPN.com at some point. I was in the 7-hole. Did not enjoy the 7-hole, by the way.
Okay.
Thirsty Kyle was in the 2-hole, and by the way, love his team. Kyle actually had a great team.
He's always good.
Yeah, but I don't enjoy drafting in the middle. I want to either be at the top or the end of the draft this year. But at any rate, Stefon Diggs came to me in the second round, so I got him on the wraparound of the second. And with my last pick, I picked Gabe Davis as sort of insurance for Stefon Diggs. I don't think he has a significant, but I think there's so much upside in that offense, and that if something were to happen to Stefon Diggs, I do think Gabriel Davis would see a increased role, a significantly increased role, and I really like his talent. I have him in our dynasty league. I have
not
Gabriel Davis.
Yeah, he's a solid prospect, as I would describe him. A solid prospect for the Buffalo Bills. We're going to talk about the Miami Dolphins in just a moment, but first, a word from Hotwire.
Imagine a nice vacation. Now, when you're imagining that, is there a view of a parking lot? No. So don't book a cheap hotel. Book an expensive hotel for cheap on Hotwire. With hot rate deals, you can stay in a nicer hotel than you ever thought was possible. Just select your city, your neighborhood, and the amenities you're looking for, and you get your hot rate. You get better views, king-size beds, and freshly pressed waffle-woven robes await you. Also, actual waffles for the record. So download the Hotwire app now and book beyond your wildest means. All bookings final.
All right, we continue with the Miami Dolphins, who are an interesting team in fantasy football. As I was thinking about them this morning, there's a chance that like 4 or 5 players from this roster are relevant, fantasy starters week to week. There's also a chance that none are locks week to week, Matthew, which is an interesting thing to say about a team that I do think is going to be good this year.
I do.
Let's break it down here.
Yeah.
So we start with quarterback Tua Tagovailoa.
I think there is going to be one lock this week on this team, but we'll get to him.
And I assume it'll be the same player that I'm thinking of, but we'll dive into that in a moment. Let's start with Tua. A couple of days ago, you asked me, you don't have Tua ranked. And I said, no, I don't. And I have him, and I know that this doesn't matter because you can't see this, but he's 26th in my quarterback ranking.
Got it.
So he's one behind the last spot that you see publicly on the website.
Right. Okay.
You have him at 22. Daniel has him at 22 as well. Tua had an uneven, to put it kindly, season last year.
He did.
He played in 10 games. He had 11 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He did not take the wheel and drive the car as effortlessly and effectively as the quarterback who went just behind him, Justin Herbert.
Yeah.
There are other quarterbacks who have had rapid success in the NFL. Part of that is why our perception of Tua is a little bit different, is that so many rookies are taking the league by storm or close to it early in their careers. But what do we make of Tua this year, Matthew, as a player? Because circumstances, I think, are in a much better spot this year for success. There's no threat of a quarterback behind him in Ryan Fitzpatrick, who he was one bad decision away from being yanked. And the weapons are much better. I mean, between the offensive line being beefed up, Will Fuller, Jaylen Waddle, Devontae Parker back, a busy running back room, it should be at least better circumstances for him to succeed.
I mean, you just said it, right? So the thing about Tua is, so I'm at quarterback 22, so it's not like I'm planting a flag on him. And there are some people that like him significantly more than me. But there is a case for Tua breaking through this year. I agree with you, right? He absolutely did not impress last year. But it was also the year after the hip surgery. I think people forget that prior to his injury at Alabama, people were talking about him in the same breath as they talk about Trevor Lawrence. Tanking for Tua was a thing.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he was being talked about as like the next great quarterback prospect. And they were talking about him in the same sort of hushed breaths that they now talk about Trevor Lawrence, right? So that skill set is there, right? And then you say, like, okay, right, better offensive line. They just added a bunch of pass catches that you just named off. And they're like, listen, if you don't succeed, it ain't going to be like, we're going to give you every opportunity. We're getting rid of Ryan Fitzpatrick so the fans aren't sitting here going like, hey, why aren't you playing the veteran who's actually playing better than you? We're beefing up the offensive line. We're giving you some real pass catchers like Will Fuller. That hurts Will Fuller's fantasy value coming from Houston to Miami, but Will Fuller can play.
Yeah.
And adding Jaylen Waddle, his former Alabama teammate, right? So adding Waddle, bringing back Devontae Parker, Mike Gesicki they have there already as well. They drafted Hunter Long as well. Know a kid you like.
Love me some Hunter Long.
Yeah, right. So like suddenly and they should have a decent run game as well. So and the other thing here is that they're not going to need Tua to win games for them. Like the defense is going to be a lot better. This is going to be one of the better defenses in the NFL. So I think there's an opportunity here that like another year removed from the hip surgery, a little bit more mobility. Maybe he gets you 200-300 rushing yards as well and a couple of rushing touchdowns. Yeah. He showed a little bit of mobility at Alabama,
bit, yeah.
right? I mean,
not
listen,
a great runner.
Yeah, I mean, like, he's not Josh Allen, but I mean, like, again, like, is he mobile in the way that Justin Herbert's mobile or Aaron Rodgers or somebody like that, right?
Sure.
Carson Wentz back in the day. So I think there's a case to be made for a Tua breakout, but there's also the case that, like, he's just sort of a game manager and, what you saw last year with the fear of throwing deep, like he was a dink and dunker guy last year too.
Ultimately, what it comes down to at the quarterback spot is that once you get past the players that you think are surefire starters, as in, if I left my draft with this player as my starter, I'm totally happy with that. And that might extend beyond 10 quarterbacks in a 10-team league. It might be that there's 13 or 14 of them. Then you've got to sort through the next group of candidates, which there's probably like 7 or 8 quarterbacks. You could say to yourself, like, this guy could be a breakout player. We talked about 2 of them yesterday, and Joe Burrow and Baker Mayfield. Tua's one of them. Sam Darnold's one of them. As crazy as that sounds, any of the rookies that could start are one of them. I was just going to
say, I mean, Trey Lance and Justin Fields, like
Trevor Lawrence,
right? I mean,
right?
Any of those 3 rookie quarterbacks easily. And
so that's what it comes down to. Is that like if you're pounding the table for Tua, it's like, okay, over which of those players,
right?
And that's where I think the rub is. And I'm not saying Tua can't have a good year. I just think that if you were to ask me, again, I guess this is sort of intuitive. That's why I have him ranked 26.
Intuitive.
Good job, Daniel. Who I would prefer.
By the way,
all those guys.
I'm sorry, but like you, I wish you guys are watching the live feed because you leaning in like that to that intuitive, just such a dad joke. I'm surprised I didn't make it.
Yeah,
but like look at what he's like. I feel like Daniel looks like
Daniel's going to a luau after this.
Daniel's like in a very bright Hawaiian shirt for those that are just listening. And the way you leaned into that dad joke, it's just like, oh my God, you're a waiter at a theme restaurant.
Yes. That sounds good to me.
It's Fun Shirt Friday, right, Daniel? We're starting this back up. Fun Shirt Friday.
I like it.
Daniel and I took part today.
On it.
I love flower. I'm a plant guy now. I didn't realize I was a plant guy, but I am now. So I like plant shirts.
Okay.
Anyway, but I think your point is well taken here, Field, is there upside to Tua? Sure. But is there as much upside with him as there is a Justin Fields or a Trey Lance or even a Baker Mayfield that are going in sort of that range?
Similar tiers,
right? Similar tier. And, I mean, they're going a little bit ahead of him, a little bit ahead of Tua. I will say this. I would not want to leave a draft needing to count on Tua. And that includes in a 2-quarterback league. Like in a 2-quarterback league, I think he's a 3.
Yeah.
In a 12-team 1-quarterback league, I think he's a 2.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I would, like I absolutely would hang on to him in Dynasty. Like I think he's an interesting flyer in best ball, but I am not as in on him as some of those other guys that we just talked about.
Agreed on that. Let's move to Myles Gaskin, who I think might be the player that you were thinking could be a weekly lock amongst the Dolphins.
Correct.
Myles Gaskin, RB18 on your ranks, RB22 on my ranks. Daniel has him at RB19. So last year he had this stretch just prior to getting injured and then just after returning from injury where he was busy, like routinely getting 15-plus carries, a little bit of passing game usage as well. Looked good. I think there are a couple of reasons why Myles Gaskin's not ranked a little bit higher, Matthew, but most specifically is that we know the Dolphins this offseason have made some efforts to upgrade or at least round out the running back room. They did sign Malcolm Brown.
Correct.
They tried to claim Kerryon Johnson. They were a team that last year invested $10 million in Jordan Howard. Like, they've been trying to address this spot. Is Myles Gaskin, they have Stefon Ahmed, by the way. Like, how certain are you that Myles Gaskin, if he's healthy, will be the guy every single week for the Dolphins?
Fairly certain.
Good. Okay.
Fairly certain. Look, I think he does he have a shorter leash than most starters? Yes. But aside from everything, I think he's special. I think I think he's more than just a guy.
Okay.
Right? There's a play, and maybe you remember this one. The Raiders game. That run against the Raiders where it was a lot of cuts and it ended up being a long touchdown and just the vision of the cuts. And that play was sort of an eye-opening play to me where I was like, okay, whoa. Yeah. Myles Gaskin might be special. I literally think I tweeted that. Guys, Myles Gaskin might be special. Might be more than just a guy. And I think, like, he didn't come in with a high draft pedigree, but I know the Dolphins were one of the teams rumored to be in the Travis Etienne, Najee Harris, Javonte Williams, kind of like they might go with one of those guys, and they didn't.
Yeah.
And so, to your point, they upgraded the offensive line. They added all these pass catchers, and if Tua's even slightly better, and we certainly all expect Tua to be better this year than he was last year, or at least I do. I expect him to be better this year. I think he will improve. Whether he'll improve enough to be a fantasy starter remains to be seen, but I think he's going to improve. I think Myles Gaskin's going to see a lot of light boxes. Like when you've got to deal with Devontae Parker, Will Fuller, and Jaylen Waddle, like you ain't stacking the box. Yeah. Like, and going. I don't know. I mean, listen. This is a guy who had 6 games last year with 15 or more touches, averaged 18.7 fantasy points per game, right? He averaged 18.3 touches per game in 2020. That was 7th most among running backs. Like real workhorse kind of stuff here. He averaged 3.9 red zone touches per game. Only Dalvin Cook and Josh Jacobs averaged more. Now, that was also a function of the fact that they didn't have a lot of weapons and they have more weapons now. But still, like when they got in close last year, they trusted him and he converted. This is a guy that had 3 or more receptions in 9 of 10 games. Like he has 3 down back ability. I'm in on Myles Gaskin. If and when my love-hate list comes out, Myles Gaskin's going to be on my love list. I think this is a guy that doesn't have a big name, but does have a big game.
Wow, well said right there.
See what I did there? There you go.
My reservations are like
you're welcome, America.
I don't have dramatic reservations. I'm a little bit lower on him than you for 2 reasons. One, the fact that even if he is the guy each week, there's still like Malcolm Brown doesn't serve a lot of purpose on your roster, unlike special teams or not playing at all, right? And not that he got a boatload of money, but still, they signed him for a reason. And then 2, Stefon Ahmed showed enough last year. And the other part of it is just that while he was busy, like not a real power back by the goal line. He had 18 goal-to-goal rushes last year.
And listen,
3 rushing touchdowns.
That's a concern. The fact that Malcolm Brown has been very effective around the goal line. Does he get vultured by Malcolm Brown a decent amount? And I'll give you one argument for you. I'll give you an anti-Gaskin argument that you didn't use, but you certainly could, which is that their head coach is Brian Flores, who comes from the Belichick school and has seen a lot of success with you use multiple backs,
right. Running back by committee,
which is obviously what Belichick has done for the majority of his coaching career, and Flores is a Belichick disciple.
Let's get to the wide receivers then, and there are 3 that are on the radar this year. Devontae Parker was wide receiver 39 last year. He had 11.9 fantasy points per game. He's 46 for you, 42, a little bit lower, 43 for me. Daniel, wide receiver 47. Will Fuller was wide receiver 8 in a points per game basis last year, Matthew. He missed the final 5 games of last year due to a suspension. He's going to miss the first game of this year to finish off that suspension. And there's also Jaylen Waddle. So let's start with Devontae Parker, and maybe we can make this one quick. 5 games last year with 35 or fewer receiving yards. Amazing 2 seasons ago. Do we think, though, because of the 2 investments in Will Fuller and also Jaylen Waddle, that Devontae Parker's fantasy value going into the season has been mitigated enough that he's really not worth a redraft pick?
Yeah, look, I don't think he's not worth a redraft. His ADP, by the way, is wide receiver 57. He's going in the 16th round.
Right, which would be basically right on the border of being drafted or not.
Right, being drafted or not. And it feels like that's a little crazy given the success we've seen for him recently. I understand.
Yes and no.
Huh?
Yes and no.
I mean, right.
Yes, it's crazy because 2 years ago he was really good.
Yeah.
No, it's not because, again, like, who do you prefer out of those 3 wide receivers? Where does he rank amongst your draft? Like, if you had to take a late-round flyer on Will Fuller's not going to be a late-round flyer.
I have Will Fuller. I have them currently ranked Fuller, Parker, Waddle.
So
that's the order I have them ranked in, but I have
and
to...
Fuller's going earlier, so if you're taking a late-round flyer, honest question right here, and put your rankings aside for a second. 15th round, Jaylen Waddle or Devontae Parker, which one are you taking?
Jaylen Waddle.
See, that's the point, though, right? Is that,
yeah.
as much as it's weird to have him ranked behind Devontae Parker, but also a player you'd prefer in a late-round flyer. So that's the yes and no of Devontae Parker.
Right, and here's the weird part, and this is like throw stats out, throw analysis, everything like that, because fantasy football is also an emotional game.
Yep.
And this is so insane because this isn't logical. Like, I acknowledge this is not logical, but I bet a lot of fantasy managers feel this way, which is I feel like there's upside to Jaylen Waddle that there isn't to Devontae Parker, which is insane because Devontae Parker, within the last 2 years, has been a top 5 fantasy wide receiver, and Jaylen Waddle hasn't played a snap in the NFL. And yet, don't you feel like there's more, quote, like if one of those guys blows up this year, even if it's like a 10% chance or a 5% chance, it feels like it's got Jaylen Waddle versus Devontae Parker. Like, Jaylen Waddle could be very special.
So as you now know, I've sort of developed a list of my guys this year.
Yeah.
And Keith Lipscomb actually texted or emailed me after the show yesterday and was like, how about making it a column? And I told him, I said, I think I'm in, but I want these things to, like, hit me as
we're talking
about them. And Jaylen Waddle's on my mind. He's on my guys list. And not in the same way. He's a different category than T. Higgins and Brandon Ayuk because those guys have a much more predictable outlook than Jaylen Waddle. But every year, not every year, but frequently we see a rookie receiver or 2 or 3 that just have a crazy, crazy year. And I'm starting to wonder more and more if the talent of Jaylen Waddle makes him that guy. I do a lot of draft work every year, and he was my favorite wide receiver this year in a crazy stacked class. He's my favorite player to watch in the draft period, and I'm starting to get that vibe surrounding Jaylen Waddle this year. He'll make my guys list in some category.
There was a stat that you said, I feel like we talked about it on first draft. Yeah, what was the Jaylen Waddle stat?
He had 17 receiving touchdowns in college.
Huh.
Guess how far those were on average?
I think I heard this stat. It's something like 25 or 30 yards. It's something insane.
4.3 yards per touchdown.
How do you average 44 yards per touchdown?
Which means some of them were above 44, and 44 was the median.
He had like a couple 8-yard touchdown catches, and he also had a couple 90-yard touchdown catches.
Yep.
So that's why he's one of my favorite late-round flyers. I know that we say all the time there's 94 of them, but still, one of my favorite late-round flyers. So let's talk about Will Fuller then for a second, Matthew, because he is going in a tier well above those other 2, and I think deservedly so, right? There's a bigger sample size. He's a really talented guy, and he does something that Jaylen Waddle also does well. He's a great vertical threat. So understand he's going to miss the first game. How certain, though, can you be with Will Fuller? This is his 6th NFL season. And we know the book on him by now, right? He may be the best player on your entire roster for 4 games of the year. He also may miss 10 of the remaining 13 games.
Well, and the other thing is that while Deshaun Watson threw deep a lot last year, and Tua didn't, and whatever Tua is this year, and maybe he throws deep more, he's healthier, he has more weapons, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever Tua is this year, he ain't going to be Deshaun Watson from last year.
Yep.
Deshaun Watson was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL last year. Correct. And had a connection with Will Fuller and was chucking it deep. And the other thing about Will Fuller, last year, when he finished as a top 10 fantasy wide receiver, is Houston got into a lot of shootouts because their defense was awful. I don't think that's going to be the case here in Miami, where we think their defense is going to be pretty good. There are also a lot more weapons competing for targets with Will Fuller than there were in Houston. And so Will Fuller is a talented player, but in terms of where he's going, his ADP is wide receiver 36. He's going in the 10th round, like behind Jerry Jeudy, just ahead of DJ Shark, like right there. And like, yeah, but like to your point, like you don't want to invest that much in the Miami Dolphin pass catchers. You probably only want one of them, right? And so if you're taking a flyer on one of them, wouldn't you rather take a 16th round pick on Jaylen Waddle than a 10th rounder on Will Fuller when you could get like a Jerry Jeudy? And I know that seems insane to say because this is a guy who's, again, a top 10 wide receiver, and we all agree at the talent when he's out there.
Points per game basis last year, as we said, wide receiver 8. So he's a tricky one. I think by now most people that are playing fantasy football or have been playing for the past few years kind of knows what you're signing up for with Will Fuller. It's a Jekyll and Hyde atmosphere depending on the week.
Really quickly, just speaking of signing up for Will Fuller, Matthew, is there any place that if I wanted to know a little bit more, dive a little bit deeper, get a little bit more information that I could sign up for something like that?
That's why you're the best producer in the business right there. Now, that's a lead. And yes,
tell me more.
Rotopass.com.
Oh, nice.
Exactly, where you get in-depth analysis on ESPN Plus. You get a year subscription to ESPN Plus with a subscription to Rotopass.com, where you could read like Mel and Todd's analysis of Jaylen Waddle coming out of college, for example. You could read Mike Clay's projections and analysis on Will Fuller. Your My Guys column, which will be coming out at some point in the future. But you get to watch the fantasy show with Matthew Berry and Daniel Dopp. So everything. So it's with a Rotopass subscription, you get ESPN Plus 5 other great fantasy football premium content sites that help you with Dynasty, Best Ball, customized rank, draft tools, bunch of different software, alerts, analysis, the ability to email in and get your question answered. Lots of great stuff. Go to the website and check it out, rotopass.com. And if you use the promo code 06010, you get 10% off.
Everybody likes a deal. Let's wrap up the Dolphins by discussing Mike Gesicki, who, as of right now, remains on the COVID list after a close contact with tight ends coach / co-offensive coordinator George Godsey, but sounds like he'll be back sooner rather than later. Mike Gesicki is pretty talented guy, as a matter of fact. Like, there's a case that Mike Gesicki could be a wide receiver in our game based off the way that the Dolphins use him formationally and by design. You and I both have him at tight end 14. He finished last year as tight end 7, nearly 11 fantasy points per game. Matthew, probably feels to me like with Gesicki, it really comes down to volume, right? Which maybe that's the case for a lot of wide receivers we discuss. He had 53 catches last year, but I just don't know that the volume you can count on consistently.
Right. Well, I think you and I. So he's tight end 7 last year. I'm at tight end 14, as do you. Daniel has him at tight end 12. So we all are fading him from his finish last year, as are the drafters. His current ADP is tight end 11. He's going in the 12-13 turn between Noah Fant and Gronk in terms of the tight ends. And I think the problem is, to your point, that we just talked about, that we don't think this is going to be a high-volume passing offense because of both the nature of the quarterback and their good defense. Last year, he's at best the 4th option on offense in terms of passing, maybe 5th if he put the running backs in there. Last year, he had 6 games with 6+ targets. He averaged 17.9 fantasy points per game. When he got looks, he was productive. But he also had 8 games last year with 3 or fewer catches.
Really talented guy.
A really talented guy. Like, we like the talent, but just will the volume be there for him to be a consistent fantasy factor at the tight end position? We don't think so. He's going to be, which is typical of the tight ends that are kind of in the 11 to 20 range, which is like the weeks he scored a touchdown, he's going to be great. And the weeks he doesn't, he isn't. And so he's a touchdown-dependent fantasy tight end this year because of the other weapons in Miami.
Tell me where you've heard that before. Oh, with like 30 other tight ends.
Of course, that's what he is. He's one of those guys.
One of the things that's frustrating to me about Mike Gesicki is I feel like he's on the field all the time. Like, he plays a ton of snaps, but those snaps don't always translate into production. So one of those guys that, like, when you're looking at him, like, he's a tight end, I want him to be I loved him last year because he was always on the field.
Yeah.
But it didn't translate as well as I was hoping for from a volume perspective. And how is that going to change with the addition of Will Fuller and Jaylen Waddle in this offense?
Probably
one question.
not.
Yeah, here's one question for you, though, Field.
Hunter Long?
11, yeah. Well, I was going to ask about Hunter Long for a second, but 11 end zone targets last year, which was 5th most among tight ends. is there an argument to be made for Gesicki because there is a connection there with Tua? You're bringing in Fuller, which he doesn't know. Yes, he played with Waddle in college, but it's been some time, and also Waddle needs to be 100% healthy. Like, is there an argument for a familiarity with Gesicki that maybe that improves this year?
Maybe, right? I'm sort of non-committal. But he's a good player. I just think, again, it's the factors that are limiting his fantasy value are out of his control, right? It's not his job to both catch and throw the ball. He just catches the ball when it's thrown his way.
He can't both catch and throw the ball. Who was that? What was that? Giselle. That's right.
That's right. After Wes Welker dropped the pass. That's one of those that reasonable minds disagree on the caliber of the throw and the catch in that play. All right, we're going to wrap up the show with a special.
By the way, we both agree. Tight end 14. We both,
a little present was sent our way via the Twitter machine.
All right, let's check it out.
Hey, now.
Oh, yeah!
Matthew with a nice mullet.
Yeah.
There you go.
That is right.
Tiger King.
I forgot about that.
God,
Tiger Matty.
Don't do your accent right now or else I will not show up to work on Monday.
That was the greatest. I still think that was one of the best episodes of all time.
I
still get
too.
people that half the people absolutely loved that accent, and half the people truly hated it.
Yeah, I was one of those that did not love it. Hey, Monday we're coming back. That's going to do it for today. Thanks for watching Fantasy Focus Football Podcast presented by Hotwire. We'll be back on Monday as we break down everything you need to know about the Jets and the Patriots.
Have a good weekend, y'all. I'll say peace out.
No!